The galactic embassy kitchens hummed with the cold efficiency of 1,000 worlds, where holographic menus displayed dishes from species who had forgotten what hunger felt like. In the corner, where steam met shadows, a human chef stirred a pot that no alien would taste, preparing meals for a daughter of stars who had called his food primitive 3 times that week. But that night, Marcus Chen would make popcorn for his son, and the sound of kernels exploding would change everything the galaxy thought it knew about Earth. Before we dive in, let us know where you're watching from. And if stories like this move you, hit that subscribe button because tomorrow's episode is even more unbelievable than this one. The embassy's grand hall stretched like a canyon, carved from crystal and ambition. Overhead, luminescent panels shifted through colors no human eye was meant to witness, casting the gathered dignitaries in shades of copper and violet. The air tasted metallic, filtered through systems designed for 17 different respiratory compositions. At the far end of the hall, behind a partition of frosted glass that might as well have been a wall between worlds, Marcus Chen chopped vegetables with the steady rhythm of someone who had learned to disappear. His chef's whites were spotless, pressed each morning in the small quarters he shared with his son. The fabric had begun to yellow at the collar, worn thin at the elbows from 3 years of service. Around him, the kitchen thrummed with automated stations that could synthesize any molecular structure, could replicate the cuisine of civilizations that had mastered fusion before Earth discovered fire. But the aliens insisted on one human chef for authenticity, the way collectors kept antiques to prove they understood history. Marcus's hands moved without hesitation, dicing carrots into perfect cubes. Earth vegetables, grown in hydroponic bays beneath the embassy, because some treaties required human food be available even if no one would eat it. Through the frosted partition, he could hear them. The delegates from Kryn, with their crystalline laughter that sounded like wind chimes shattering. The Veltorian ambassadors, whose voices rumbled like distant thunder. And above them all, clear as a bell cast in ice, the voice of Princess Zylara. She was holding court near the eastern window, where the city's towers rose like accusations against the sky. Marcus had seen her only twice before, always surrounded by her entourage of advisors who moved like shadows stitched to starlight. She stood taller than most humans, her skin shifting between shades of lavender and deep blue depending on the light. Her eyes, large and luminous, held the casual cruelty of someone who had never been told no. "Earth cuisine," she said, and the words dripped with amusement, "is barely edible sustenance for lesser beings. They boil things. Can you imagine? Boiling, like cavemen discovering fire for the first time." Laughter rippled through her audience. Marcus's knife never paused. He had heard worse. 3 years of worse. The Kryn delegate who spit into his soup and called it seasoning. The Veltorian who made him prepare a feast and then fed it to the embassy's waste recyclers while Marcus watched. He had learned to keep his eyes on his work, his shoulders square, his pride folded small enough to fit inside his chest, where no one could see it break. The partition glass suddenly cleared, turned transparent by someone's casual command. Now, the entire hall could watch the human chef at his primitive work. Marcus felt their eyes like pressure, like gravity doubling. He reached for the next carrot and continued cutting, each slice exactly 5 millimeters thick, because precision was the only dignity they had left him. The diplomatic dinner began at twilight, when the embassy's dome retracted to reveal stars that belonged to no constellation Earth had ever named. Marcus served in silence, placing dishes before delegates who barely glanced at the food. Each plate was a small meditation, vegetables arranged like mandalas, sauces reduced to their essential flavors. He had learned to cook with the focus of prayer, knowing prayer was all he had. Princess Zylara sat at the head table, draped in robes that seemed woven from liquid mercury. Her mother, Queen Valora, presided beside her, ancient and terrifying, with eyes like frozen nebulas. Between them sat Chancellor Draven, whose silver carapace caught the starlight and threw it back as judgment. Marcus approached with the main course, a roasted root vegetable tower infused with herbs grown in his own small garden. Zylara lifted her fork as if handling contaminated material. She took one bite, chewed slowly, and set the fork down with theatrical precision. The hall quieted. Even the automated systems seemed to hold their breath. "This," she announced, her voice carrying across the crystal canyon, "is what happens when a species discovers fire but forgets to evolve past it." The delegates erupted in laughter. A Kryn ambassador slapped the table with a sound like breaking glass. Chancellor Draven's mandibles clicked in approval. Queen Valora remained motionless, her expression unreadable as deep space. "The texture is acceptable, I suppose, if one enjoys chewing matter that has merely been subjected to heat." Zylara lifted her glass, swirling liquid that glowed faintly purple. "On my world, we abandoned such primitive cooking methods 7,000 years ago. We learned to restructure food at the molecular level, to make nutrients sing. This?" She gestured at Marcus's creation with dismissal so casual it burned hotter than contempt. "This is archaeology. Barely edible sustenance for lesser beings who still use flame like cavemen proud of their first spark." Marcus stood 3 feet away, hands clasped behind his back, watching his work be dismantled by words. His son Finn was home in their quarters, probably practicing his mathematics, waiting for his father to return. 7 years old and already too familiar with patience, with waiting for a father who came home smelling like other people's contempt. "Remove it," Zylara commanded, not looking at Marcus. "Bring something synthesized, something civilized." Ambassador Kellis, a thin creature with too many joints, moved forward quickly. "Your Highness, the treaty requires we serve. I am aware of the treaty." Zylara's eyes finally found Marcus, and in them he saw something worse than hatred. He saw nothing. Complete absence of recognition that he was anything other than furniture that occasionally moved. "The human may continue his work. I simply will not pretend to consume it." Marcus bowed, the movement economical and precise. He lifted the plate she had not finished, turned, and walked back through the partition that turned opaque behind him, like a curtain drawn on a tragedy no one else could see. The embassy settled into its nocturnal rhythms like a great beast exhaling. Corridors dimmed to twilight. The diplomatic wing fell silent, save for the whisper of air filtration and the occasional murmur of languages that predated human civilization. In the kitchen, Marcus moved through his closing routine with the efficiency of ritual. Wipe the counters, store the unused ingredients. Hang the chef's whites in the narrow locker that smelled faintly of industrial soap. He changed into civilian clothes, a simple shirt and worn pants that had survived 3 interstellar relocations. His fingers ached from the knife work, from maintaining perfect cuts while absorbing perfect insults. But the night was not finished. Through the back corridors, past the maintenance bays where nobody important ever walked, Marcus made his way to the residential quarters. Their apartment was small. 2 rooms carved from what had probably been a storage space, with a window that overlooked the embassy's waste reclamation facility. But Finn had covered one wall with drawings of Earth animals he had never seen except in archives. Tigers and elephants and whales, rendered in careful crayon strokes by a boy who understood that memory was the last country they truly owned. Finn sat at the narrow table, his math tablet displaying equations that would have impressed most 12-year-olds. He looked up when Marcus entered, his face brightening in the way that made every humiliation worthwhile. "Dad, you're early. Finished faster tonight." Marcus ruffled his son's hair, dark like his own, still baby-soft despite 7 years of growing. "How about we make some popcorn?" Finn's eyes went wide. Popcorn was a rare treat, saved for special occasions when Marcus could spare the kernels from his personal rations. They cost more than synthesized food, required importing from Earth's agricultural stations, but Marcus had never stopped believing in the value of real things. He retrieved the small pot from the cabinet, the kernels from their hiding place behind the rice. Oil heated slowly on the electric burner while Finn bounced in his chair with contained excitement. Marcus dropped the kernels in, covered the pot, and began to shake it gently over the heat. The first pop came like a small firework, then another. Then a cascade, a percussion section, performing chaos with perfect timing. Finn giggled, the sound pure and unspoiled by the politics that governed their lives. Marcus smiled, shaking the pot in steady rhythm, watching steam escape from beneath the lid. The smell bloomed through their small space, rich and honest and utterly human. Butter and salt and something deeper, something that spoke of Iowa fields and autumn harvests and a planet most aliens considered primitive. The popping slowed. Marcus removed the pot and poured golden clouds into a bowl they shared. In the corridor outside, footsteps approached and then stopped. Someone stood beyond their door, silent as held breath. Marcus did not notice. He was watching his son eat popcorn with the solemnity of communion, and in that moment, the galaxy could wait. The knock came sharp and imperial, the kind of sound that expected doors to open themselves. Marcus froze, bowl halfway to his mouth. Finn's eyes widened with the particular fear children learn when they live among those who consider them less. No one knocked on their door. No one visited the human quarters. Visitors meant inspections, meant trouble, meant someone had decided the margins of their existence needed shrinking. Marcus set the bowl down carefully and opened the door. Princess Zylara stood in the narrow corridor, her robes shimmering like oil on water. Without her entourage, she seemed both smaller and more dangerous, like a blade unsheathed. Her luminous eyes swept past Marcus to the interior of their apartment, cataloging everything with the efficiency of surveillance technology. She did not ask permission. She simply stepped inside. "What is that smell?" Her voice had lost its performative contempt, replaced by something Marcus could not identify. Curiosity, perhaps, or hunger. "Popcorn, Your Highness." Marcus remained by the door, body angled to shield Finn, who had gone very still at the table. "Popcorn." She repeated the words as if tasting each syllable. "I followed it through 6 corridors. It is unlike anything in the embassy's chemical index." Her eyes found the bowl, golden kernels, still steaming. "You are preparing food at this hour? For my son?" Zylara noticed Finn for the first time. She studied him with the detached interest of a biologist observing specimens. Finn stared back, too frightened to look away. The princess moved closer to the table, her robes whispering across the floor. She leaned down, inhaling deeply. "Explain what this is." Marcus hesitated. Orders from royalty were not optional, but everything in him resisted letting her touch something he had made for Finn. Still, refusal meant consequences. He picked up a single kernel and held it out. Corn is a grain from earth. When heated, the moisture inside turns to steam. Pressure builds until the kernel explodes, turning inside out. What was hard becomes soft. What was small becomes large. Zylara plucked the kernel from his palm with 2 elegant fingers. She examined it from multiple angles, held it to the light, then placed it on her tongue. Her eyes closed. For 3 seconds, she was absolutely motionless. When her eyes opened, something had shifted in them, some calculation recalibrated. Again, it was not a request. Marcus offered the bowl. Zylara took a handful, eating with focus that seemed almost desperate. She chewed slowly, as if trying to decode a message written in flavor. When she finished, she turned to Marcus with an expression he had never seen on any alien face in the embassy. Confusion, genuine, unguarded confusion. "How did you do this?" "I heated kernels in oil." "No." Her voice sharpened. "How did you make me remember something I have never experienced?" The question hung in the air between them, like the last note of a song neither knew how to finish. Marcus gestured to the small chair across from Finn. Zylara hesitated, as if sitting in human furniture might compromise her somehow, then lowered herself with the caution of someone entering foreign territory. Finn clutched his handful of popcorn, watching the princess who had never acknowledged his father as anything more than a servant. "It's just corn," Marcus said quietly. "A simple crop humans have grown for thousands of years. There is nothing simple about it." Zylara's fingers traced the rim of the bowl. "Our food scientists can replicate any flavor, any texture, any nutritional profile. We have synthesized dishes from extinct species, recreated banquets from civilizations that died before your sun ignited. But this, she lifted another kernel, this should not affect me. Marcus pulled out his own chair and sat, a small rebellion in itself. Royalty did not share tables with kitchen staff, but she had entered his home, had demanded answers, and some part of him was tired of standing. When you heat the kernel, the starch inside gelatinizes, the proteins denature and reorganize. Pressure builds to around 135 pounds per square inch before the hull ruptures. He spoke in the measured tone of his old life, before Finn, before the embassy, when he had stood in university laboratories explaining molecular gastronomy to students who thought cooking was beneath science. The kernel inverts at explosive speed. What you taste is the Maillard reaction, amino acids and sugars breaking down and recombining into hundreds of new compounds. Zylara's eyes had gone very still, very focused. You speak like a scientist. I was one. Before what? Marcus glanced at Finn, who was watching this exchange with the intensity of someone witnessing something impossible. Before seemed too large a word for all it contained, before his wife died in the colony collapse on Mars. Before he became a single father, with no family and fewer options. Before he learned that keeping Finn fed mattered more than keeping his pride intact. Before I needed to be something else. Zylara leaned forward. These Maillard compounds. We have catalogued them, synthesized them, added them to our databases. They should produce a predictable sensory response. But they don't, do they? No. The admission seemed to cost her something. They trigger memory structures in my neural cortex that have no corresponding experience. I taste this, and I remember warmth I have never felt. Comfort I have never known. It is as if the molecules carry information beyond their chemical composition. Marcus picked up a kernel, rolled it between his fingers. Maybe that's because you're not just tasting the corn. You're tasting everything that went into it. The soil, the sun, the time, the hands that planted it, the intention behind growing, something simple in a complicated universe. That is not scientific. No, Marcus agreed. But it's true. Zylara stared at the bowl as if it had betrayed her. Outside, the embassy towers hummed with their eternal efficiency, synthesizing meals no one would remember. Inside this small room, a princess sat at a human table, learning that some hungers could not be catalogued. Morning arrived with the artificial brightness the embassy used to simulate day cycles for 17 different species. Marcus woke to find Finn already dressed, staring out their small window at the waste reclamation facility below. Something in the boy's posture made Marcus's stomach tighten. What's wrong? There are guards outside our door. Marcus moved to the entrance and opened it. 2 Veltorian sentries stood at attention, their armor gleaming like polished obsidian. They did not acknowledge him, they simply stood, weapons held at precise angles, blocking the corridor. Am I under arrest? You are. Summoned, one replied without looking at him. The Grand Chamber. Immediately. The walk through the embassy felt like descent. Delegates who normally ignored Marcus now watched him pass with expressions ranging from amusement to anticipation. Word had spread, as word always did in places where politics was the only currency that mattered. By the time Marcus reached the Grand Chamber's towering doors, his hands had gone cold. The chamber held the Galactic Culinary Council, 7 beings whose opinions determined food, trade across 12 sectors. They sat elevated on a curved dais, backlit by light that made them appear as silhouettes of judgment. Below them, Chancellor Draven stood with his characteristic smugness, mandibles clicking in what Marcus had learned to recognize as satisfaction. Princess Zylara stood to one side, her face carefully neutral. Queen Valora occupied the highest seat, ancient and still as carved stone. Marcus Chen. Draven's voice echoed through the chamber. Last night you prepared unauthorized food for a member of the royal family. So that was the angle. Marcus had broken protocol, had dared to feed royalty without permission, without inspection, without the proper channels. He had known this would come. He had simply hoped for more time. I prepared popcorn for my son. Princess Zylara requested to taste it. You contaminated a royal palate with unsanctioned earth matter. Draven gestured to the council above. The princess has reported unusual neurological responses, memory disruption, emotional irregularities. You have committed culinary assault against the crown. Marcus felt the accusation like a physical weight. Culinary assault carried penalties ranging from deportation to imprisonment. Finn would be alone, shuttled to some Earth colony where orphans were raised by institutions that had no time for gentleness. However, Draven continued, smile widening. Her Highness has requested an alternative. Zylara stepped forward. When she spoke, her voice carried none of last night's confusion. It was pure royal decree. I propose a challenge. Marcus Chen will present Earth cuisine before the Galactic Culinary Council. If he can prove that human food has scientific and cultural value worthy of the galactic trade agreements, his transgression will be forgiven. If he fails, Earth loses its culinary export privileges for 50 years, and he faces standard penalties for unauthorized royal contact. The chamber erupted in murmurs. 50 years would devastate Earth's agricultural economy. Millions depended on those exports. Draven's mandibles clicked louder. The council accepts. You have 3 days to prepare. We suggest you choose your ingredients wisely, human. You are cooking for your entire species now. The demonstration kitchen gleamed like an operating theater, all sterile surfaces and harsh light designed to expose every flaw. Marcus stood at the central station while the Galactic Culinary Council observed from their elevated positions. 7 species unified only in their skepticism. Behind a transparent barrier, hundreds of delegates had gathered to witness what they assumed would be humanity's humiliation. Marcus had slept perhaps 2 hours in 3 days. He had spent the rest cataloging every ingredient in his personal stores, every technique he remembered from his previous life, every lesson learned in university laboratories before the universe taught him that knowledge mattered less than survival. Finn sat in the visitor section, small and worried, flanked by embassy staff who had been ordered to escort him afterward if Marcus failed. Chancellor Draven stood at the prosecutor's position, his carapace polished to mirror brightness. The human will present 3 courses. Each must demonstrate technical proficiency, cultural significance, and nutritional value worthy of intergalactic trade consideration. The council will evaluate based on molecular complexity, flavor, architecture, and innovation. His mandibles clicked with barely suppressed glee. Begin. Marcus reached for his first ingredient. Tomatoes, grown in the embassy's hydroponic bay, red as old blood. He sliced them with precision that made the knife whisper. Layering them with mozzarella he had cultured himself over the past 72 hours. Basil leaves that carried the memory of Earth's summer in their cells. Caprese salad, he announced, his voice steady despite everything. A traditional Italian preparation that demonstrates acid balance, protein coagulation, and the enzymatic breakdown of fresh herbs. A Kryn counselor made a sound like crystals scraping. You present us with uncooked vegetables? I present you with intentional simplicity. The tomato's glutamic acid content creates umami through natural fermentation. The mozzarella's protein structure at precisely 21 degrees Celsius produces optimal textural contrast. The basil releases eugenol compounds that interact with both the acid and the fat to create flavor complexity your synthesizers cannot replicate because they lack the variable of time. He placed the dishes before them. The counselors examined the food as if it might be contaminated. One prodded it with an instrument, another scanned it with technology that made the air shimmer. Finally, reluctantly, they tasted. Silence stretched. Marcus watched their faces, reading nothing in features too alien for human interpretation. Then the Veltorian counselor, eldest of the 7, set down her utensil. The flavor is adequate, but this proves nothing a synthesizer cannot accomplish. Then allow me to continue. Marcus moved to his second station. Here waited ingredients he had bartered for, traded favors for. Ingredients that had cost him 3 days of sleep and every connection he had quietly built over 3 years of invisible service. Flour, yeast, water, salt, the building blocks of bread, simple as prayer, complex as faith. He began to knead, his hands moving with the rhythm he had learned from his grandmother, who had learned it from hers, a chain of knowledge stretching back through centuries of humans who understood that some things could not be rushed. The dough transformed under Marcus's hands, gluten strands aligning into networks that would trap carbon dioxide and create structure. He worked in silence while the council watched with increasing impatience. Bread required time, required waiting. 2 concepts that species who had mastered instantaneous synthesis found intolerable. How long must we observe this primitive process? A counselor with translucent skin and too many eyes gestured dismissively. We have synthesizers that can produce identical molecular structures in seconds. Marcus shaped the dough into a round, scored it with deliberate cuts, and slid it into the oven he had spent hours calibrating. 30 minutes. The chamber erupted in protests. Chancellor Draven seized the moment like a weapon. The human wastes the council's time with theatrical delay. This is precisely why Earth cuisine has no place in galactic trade. Inefficiency masquerading as craft. Then we adjourn until the bread is ready, said the Veltorian counselor, rising with clear disdain. No. Princess Xylara's voice cut through the chaos like a blade through silk. She descended from the observation area, her robes flowing like liquid night. Queen Valora shifted in her seat, the first movement she had made since the trial began. Every delegate in the chamber turned to watch as Xylara approached the demonstration station. You will wait, she commanded, and the council, confused but compliant, remained seated. Xylara stood beside Marcus, close enough that he could see the bioluminescent patterns shifting beneath her skin. When she spoke, her voice carried to every corner of the chamber. 3 days ago, I consumed popcorn prepared by this human. I experienced neurological responses our medical staff could not explain. Memory activations in brain regions that held no corresponding data. Emotional reactions coded to experiences I have never had. She paused, letting the words settle. Yesterday, our scientists completed their analysis of the corn kernels. She produced a holographic display that bloomed above the demonstration station. Molecular structures rotated in 3-dimensional space, highlighting compounds in pulsing colors. The popcorn contains a precursor molecule we have been unable to synthesize. It is chemically similar to valerin, the compound our agricultural collapse destroyed 200 years ago. Her voice remained steady, but something beneath it trembled. On my world, 7 million citizens suffer from Neverth syndrome, a neurological condition that causes memory degradation and emotional dissociation. It is our greatest medical crisis. We have searched 40 systems for a cure. The chamber had gone absolutely silent. Even Draven's mandibles had stilled. This primitive earth corn produces a bioavailable precursor that our preliminary tests suggest could treat, possibly cure, Neverth syndrome. Xylara turned to face the council directly. While we have been dismissing human agriculture as backwards, they have been growing medicine we forgot existed. Queen Valora leaned forward for the first time, her ancient eyes focusing on Marcus with an intensity that made the air feel heavier. The oven timer chimed. The bread was ready, and suddenly, Marcus understood that he was no longer cooking for Earth's trade agreements. He was cooking for something that mattered infinitely more. Marcus removed the bread from the oven. The crust had darkened to deep mahogany, split along the scores he had cut, releasing steam that carried the smell of wheat fields and summer rain. He placed it on the cooling rack and turned to face the council, who now watched him with expressions ranging from confusion to cautious interest. I was not always a chef, Marcus said quietly. I was a molecular gastronomist at the International Food Science Institute on Mars Colony. My research focused on bioactive compounds in heritage crops, specifically how traditional growing and preparation methods preserved medicinal properties that industrial synthesis destroyed. Chancellor Draven's spines bristled. Then why do you scrub floors in an embassy kitchen? Marcus glanced at Finn, who sat very straight in his chair, trying to be brave. My wife died when the colony's atmospheric processes failed. I had a 7-year-old son and no family on Earth. The embassy needed a human chef. I needed employment that would keep us together. He turned back to the council. So I took the job. But I never stopped studying. He sliced the bread, the knife releasing more steam, more aroma. The interior was perfect, holes distributed with the randomness that only living yeast could create, structure that spoke of fermentation and time and the careful violence of heat. Every meal I have prepared, here, I have documented. Ingredient origins, preparation methods, molecular changes during cooking. 3 years of data collected in margins of time no one thought to monitor. He placed slices before each counselor. I grew these ingredients in the hydroponic bay from heirloom seeds I brought from Earth. The wheat is a landrace variety, genetically diverse, adapted through generations to specific soil conditions. The yeast is a strain cultured from wild spores, containing bacterial communities that commercial synthesis cannot replicate. The Veltorian counselor broke off a piece of bread, studying it. Why does this matter? Because diversity is resilience, because shortcuts cost more than time. Marcus met her ancient eyes. Your species mastered food synthesis and abandoned agriculture. You gained efficiency and lost genetic libraries that took millennia to develop. When your crops failed, you had no backup, no diversity, no foundation to rebuild from. He gestured to the bread, to the caprese salad still sitting before them, to the bowl of popcorn Zylara had brought as evidence. Earth is primitive by your standards. We still plant seeds in dirt. We still wait for harvest. We still prepare food with our hands. His voice strengthened. But we never stopped maintaining the biological archive. Every heritage crop, every traditional technique, every grandmother's recipe carries information your databases deleted for efficiency. We are not advanced. But we remember. Queen Valora spoke for the first time, her voice like stone grinding against stone. You have been studying us. I have been studying food. You simply happened to need it. The Queen's expression might have been a smile, or a threat, or recognition. The council deliberated for 17 minutes. Marcus stood beside his demonstration station while the chamber hummed with whispered speculation. Finn had moved to stand closer, and Marcus rested a hand on his son's shoulder, and anchored both. Princess Zylara remained near them. Her presence, a statement no one could quite interpret. When the Veltorian counselor rose, the chamber fell silent. The Galactic Culinary Council recognizes Earth cuisine as possessing significant scientific and cultural value. Trade privileges are not only maintained but expanded. Furthermore, we recommend immediate establishment of an agricultural heritage institute, with Marcus Chen appointed as Director of Human Crop Research and Culinary Diplomacy. The words landed like stones in still water, ripples spreading outward. Chancellor Draven's mandibles clicked in fury, but he could not protest a unanimous council decision. Several delegates began talking at once, voices rising in excitement or concern or calculation of what this shift in status meant for existing treaties. Queen Valora descended from her seat, moving with the slow certainty of tectonic plates. She approached Marcus, and every being in the chamber held their breath. When she spoke, her voice carried centuries. You kept faith with knowledge my people discarded. You maintained what we believed was obsolete. She looked at the bread, the simple perfection of it. We called you primitive while we starved ourselves of memory. I just kept cooking, Marcus said simply. No. The Queen's eyes held something that might have been regret. You kept teaching, whether anyone listened or not. Princess Zylara stepped forward, and for the first time since Marcus had known her, she bowed. Not deeply, not with subservience, but with the acknowledgement of someone recognizing an equal they had failed to see. I called your food primitive, she said. I apologize. Marcus nodded, accepting what was offered. Apologies from royalty were rare as coherent light from dying stars. The days that followed moved with the careful speed of diplomacy. The embassy kitchen was expanded, transformed into a laboratory where Marcus trained alien scientists in Earth agricultural techniques. They learned to culture yeast, to test soil compositions, to understand that growing food was not just chemistry, but relationship. Princess Zylara visited often, studying with the intensity of someone trying to recover a language their people had forgotten how to speak. Treaties were rewritten, trade routes expanded. Earth seeds were transported to 7 systems, planted in soil that had not known diversity in centuries. The results would take years to measure, but hope moved faster than harvest. Every evening, Marcus still made popcorn for Finn in their small apartment, though it was larger now, with windows that overlooked the embassy gardens instead of waste facilities. And sometimes Zylara joined them, sitting at their table, learning that the simplest things often carried the deepest truths. In a universe built on complexity, they had discovered that wisdom sometimes smelled like butter and salt, tasted like fresh bread, and sounded like kernels exploding into something larger than themselves.